Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. Benjamin Franklin. Hello and welcome to the Young Republicans of Oregon podcast series. Today I have a special guest with me, Representative Ed Diehl. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking such time out of your schedule to come on the show. Before we get started on this very important and special episode, can you give a little history about yourself and what brought you into Oregon politics?
You bet. Well, first off, I represent House District 17 that covers East Salem up through the Santiam Canyon, the towns of Turner, Almsville, State, Sublimity, Mill City, Lyons, Mahama, Gates, Detroit, Idana, even all the way up. Just a beautiful chunk of Oregon, and it's an honor to represent them. I've lived in the district for 25 years with my wife, Jamie, raised my kids in the district, and I've been a Republican as long as I can remember, but I was not actively involved in politics other than, reading about it and taking positions on issues and things like that. But what really changed it for me was our response to COVID, the lockdowns of businesses, the lockdowns of schools, the length of time that Oregon took that on. I just found it simply unacceptable and an infringement on our rights. And also the 2020 Labor Day wildfires just devastated my district. We lost 700 homes. We lost 5 lives. And I look at both those situations and I go, we made terrible decisions. Our leadership made terrible decisions. And I can make better decisions than this. With redistricting, when we ended up having a new district that was unclaimed, thought, well, if I don't give this a shot, if I don't try this, I'll regret it. So my wife and I prayed on it and decided let's give it a go, and we won.
Well, that's awesome, and that's a honestly great opportunity. It was a new district. You came in, and I believe you are helping make better decisions for. I don't think our leadership of lately has been doing great decisions, especially with this new request for a proposal by the Secretary of State of Oregon. So I want to get into this. So what does MDM mean for those who just hear that term thrown out everywhere?
Well, MDM is an acronym for misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Now, whatever that means is up to interpretation. But the Secretary of State is looking to contract with a third party so they can track what they deem is MDM, mis, dis, and malinformation, record that. And what I mean by that is scouring our social media, the social media posts of Oregonians, recording that, storing that information, and then analyzing it using artificial intelligence to identify what they deem as MDM. Mm-hmm. And they use the AI system to identify threats and develop what they call counter narratives that they would push out, messaging they would push out in opposition to MDM. So it's pretty shocking to me. It's Ministry of Truth stuff right there. But they go even further. If you read the RFP, they will actually reach out and contact the social media platforms to let them know if the Secretary of State believes that we've violated, and Oregonians has violated the terms of service. And they will reach out to law enforcement agencies, state and federal law enforcement agencies, if they believe that there are threats to personal safety or for other reasons or security. So it is really going well beyond what our Secretary of State has authority to do. It's violating First Amendment rights, clearly, and we want to put a halt to it.
I could not agree more, especially reading the definition they provide for MDM. What they consider misinformation is false but not created or shared with the intention to cause harm, disinformation, deliberately created to mislead, harm, or manipulate persons, social groups, organization, or country, and malinformation. It's based on fact, but used out of context to mislead, harm, and manipulate. While these may be dictionary definitions, in a political sense, this is such a vague definition that it's very much gives so much power to whoever wields the scepter of I declare this misinformation. I declare this malinformation.
Yeah, it's totally up to interpretation. So what I think would be skeptical inquiry into our election system, they may deem as misinformation and want that information blocked from
Mm-hmm.
social media, which is completely unacceptable. It really strikes as trying to stifle free speech, stifle skeptical and thoughtful inquiry. And yeah, I was blown away when I read this request for proposal, and we've seen this play out nationally. You know, we've had there was a court case, federal appeals court, with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and the judge determined that the CDC and FBI had actively worked to suppress his speech and the speech of some other scientists regarding COVID. That was a case where we had government agencies actively reaching out to social media platforms, encouraging them to suppress speech. How is what we're reading in this RFP any different than that? I don't think it is.
I don't think so either, especially when we see that throughout the Western world, we're seeing governments using NGOs, which I would consider this company that Oregon's trying to partner with, an NGO, to enforce what they think is not acceptable speech or counteracts them. And we've seen in the Twitter files that Matt Taibbi and another whistleblower have identified in federal hearings that major intelligence agencies are creating this great censorship empire across the Western world where they want to suppress, censor anyone who doesn't fall in line. And we're seeing the detrimental impact of this type of ministry of truth on a global scale. And I want to also talk quickly about how they even advance the presentation of factual material and counter the erosion of trust in public institutions and election system. This whole system seems to me is, I don't like that word being said. I don't like your story being said. You hurt my feelings. You're censored. And we're giving a giant shield to whoever's on our side.
Yeah, it's outrageous. And, you know, the company that they're looking at using is a UK-based company.
Mm-hmm.
And the UK does not have First Amendment protections like the United States does. So I think their view of free speech is much different than ours. So definitely the intent is to filter speech that they don't like, stifle that, and push out a narrative that they want to push, which may or may not be true, but it's the narrative that they want people to hear.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree. And going back to the UK as our primary example, we know that the UK is very much always monitored and they don't have a freedom of speech. Many people have been arrested for saying what is naughty because they had wrong thought, and they're in horrible prison sentences. And whatever media that they like, that they criticize. So any Brit who's like, well, I don't think that's right. I think the UK should be truly away from the EU. Well, they can arrest you for that. And jumping on that comment, I did research onto this company as well. The CEO of this company, which his name is Lyric Jan, founder and CEO of Logically, in an episode on the East West Coffee Shop, which is from a European pan country called the European Leadership Network, who was inspired by President Obama back in 2009, he pretty much confirms that his main reason for building this company was the 2016 election in the United States, electing Donald J. Trump as president of the United States, and Brexit. He didn't like how organic thoughts were being generated through the populations in local countries all across the West. And he wants to basically suppress those he thinks that are not aligned with what he would coin as democratic institutions or threats to the state as a whole.
Wow. So just exactly the guy I want in charge of scouring and monitoring Oregonians' thoughts. Yeah, I had not read that information that you just shared, but it definitely sounds like he has an agenda.
I think he does. And some of it is personal. Like, I believe he unfortunately had a family death due to some bad information that was not true. But in the end, even in that case where something bad truly happened, if it truly causes harm, then perhaps there is a true something like drinking bleach. Obviously, everyone knows drinking bleach is terrible for you. So if you're promoting that type of information, then you may have a point. But I do believe that there's a trickle down effect where you start going after these people and saying, well, we're going to suppress this because it's mean. We're going to suppress this because it's wrong. Then it creates a whole apparatus of, well, corporate policy says this, government says this, you can't say this, so you're under arrest. And threats are not considered free speech. Anyone threatening violence against an individual or organization, that is not a legitimate use of free speech. It's violence, and you should be arrested for that. So there are some limitation on speech, but it's very finite, in my opinion.
It is very finite, and the courts have spelled that out in the United States time and time again. So you have the right to say things that may not be correct or maybe open to opinion. And what happens, my biggest concern here is when you start suppressing people's speech, when you downplay some speech or outright prevent it from being communicated, you're only going to feed into different conspiracy theories. You're only going to create that doubt and uncertainty in people's minds. And I know that we saw that with COVID, and we've seen that with the elections. There are legitimate points of view that were suppressed. There's also some conspiratorial things that we know are not true that have been spread. But I really believe that if you start suppressing points of view and take those out of the public square, it's going to be filled with the void will be filled with conspiracies. So
I agree.
let the free exchange of ideas take place.
Yeah, I fully agree. We have a right to say, well, I think something went fishy over here. And we should have those comments so that way we can trust our election system. And the more you suppress people, the more paranoid people get, in my opinion, because then they see that their claims were maybe justified in their head because you would fail and are so resistant on investigating it. It creates a doubt in their mind that things are truly good, things are truly going right. And I think in the end, they don't really care whoever wishes to truly bring this into power because they want to control. And that's why I've been seeing all across these countries that are implementing these types of policies. So I'm going to quote quickly just the new president of Argentina. And I think he's fundamentally right on this point where you can't give them an inch. Do not give them an inch when they're going after your rights.
Yeah, we can't give them. We cannot yield on this. This is one of those issues which we all have to stand firm on. And there are the thing with our election systems. There are issues. There are concerns, and those need to be taken. Those concerns need to be taken seriously and discussed openly. So when you dismiss valid concerns and replace it with a system that's going to monitor our speech and report on us if we say things they don't like, that just completely erodes trust between the
Mhm.
people and our government agencies.
I agree. And I think we are truly on the same wavelength on what we view on freedom of speech and how we both denounce this horrible proposal that the Secretary of State's bringing to the government. So, a
Yeah.
great question I have right now is what are Oregon Republicans doing? As you talked about, there is a letter. So, can you explain the process of how this letter came to be and what's the next step for Republicans?
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to thank my colleagues, so many of my colleagues, for joining me in putting this letter together. Um, so that's kind of the first round, is to make it very clear to the Secretary of State that we do not want to see this contract implemented. We want to
Mhm.
halt on the contract. The next step that I've taken is I've asked for very specific information, because what we learned is that this contract hasn't been implemented, but they did do a pilot project with Logically AI. They did a pilot project, so I want to see the reports from that pilot project. Give me
Mhm.
the detailed data and reports. Also provide details on the contract that was implemented. So we want to see that. Once I get that, then I'll be asking for uh, what actions were taken, because they do claim in their response that there were actions that they took in response based on the information they got during the pilot project. That alone is a concern. So I'm following up on that, because we have a statute in place that does not allow law enforcement to collect information on citizens.
Mhm.
ORS 181A.250 says no law enforcement agency may collect or maintain information about the political, religious, or social views, associations, or activities of any individual group, and so on. They cannot collect and maintain that information. Now, while the Secretary of State is not a law enforcement agency as defined in statute, it sure seems to me that they're acting as a proxy for law enforcement with this. So I reached out to our our legal counsel within the Capitol to get their opinion on this. They, while they didn't believe that the Secretary of State was acting as a proxy, they did believe that it was very clear that law enforcement should not accept this information from the Secretary of State unless it relates to an investigation already underway.
Mhm.
So, uh, but based on the letter I received from the Secretary of State, they did feed this information to law enforcement during the pilot project.
Oh.
So there may be a violation of state law
Mhm.
that took place. So we need to investigate that further. So I will have some follow-on correspondence with the Secretary of State on this once I get that additional information on the reports. The other thing that a couple of other legislators have joined in on is a lawsuit directly suing the Secretary of State over this. Senators Thatcher and Linthicum have joined that lawsuit. So we're attacking this on, I guess, two fronts.
That's great to hear because we cannot give an inch when it comes to the right of freedom of speech. It's not just a Republican issue, it's everyone's issue, left, right,
This
and
is
center.
this is not a partisan issue at all. I can't imagine that the Democrats would be happy if a far-right Secretary of State was implementing a system like this either. This is one of those issues that should appeal to Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike, anybody that values our Constitution and First Amendment. And so I hope that we can get more of our legislators to join in on this call, maybe even possibly get a hearing on this issue. I hope that we can make that happen, but we'll see. We'll keep pushing it.
I hope so, because I do not believe that the Secretary of State is acting in good faith in this regard. I think this is clear just a power grab to completely have even more control in the state of Oregon for Democrats, in my point of view. But I will say I'm glad to hear that there's more fighting going on. But I think we need to tackle it also from a non-legislative issue, not just from our elected officials. So from your point of view, what would be the best thing for regular Oregonians who want to get involved and say, this is unequivocally wrong, we need to fight this?
Well, one step is to reach out to the Secretary of State, call or email and say you join my colleagues and I in urging a halt to this implementation, and making it very clear that you also believe it is an attack on our First Amendment rights. So that they need to hear that. The Secretary of State needs to hear that from as many Oregonians as possible. There's also an opportunity to join in that lawsuit that I mentioned that Senator Thatcher and Linthicum are part of. They can also reach out to their legislators and demand a hearing on this issue. And also I think there were 27 of us that signed this letter. That still leaves a lot of senators and representatives that did not sign on. So reach out to those representatives and senators and urge them to join us.
And the Young Republicans of Oregon will join the Republicans within the legislature, as we also unequivocally denounce this RFP. We think that this is a violation of all Oregonians' rights, and we're also calling on for a petition, as we want to show through a written petition document that this is extremely unpopular and that this needs to end immediately, and this has to stop now.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I applaud you for making that effort.
So I think I've taken up enough of your busy schedule time. Is there any final comments you have, Representative?
No, I really appreciate this discussion. I think we need to raise awareness on this issue. So I would urge, and I've talked to a lot of folks about this, there's a lot of people that are not happy with the direction of this state. The only way that's going to change is if we get involved. It's up to us as citizens. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We have to engage with these institutions, make our voices heard. And so I appreciate the help from everybody who has gone out of their way to raise this issue. A lot of citizens have spoken up very loudly on this already, and we need some more of us to do that. The other thing I'd say is, there's an election coming up in 2024, and I would urge everyone to vote for legislators that do value First Amendment rights and will stand up against these kinds of decisions from agencies.
Agreed. Get your voice heard, reach out to your representatives, and register to vote. That's the one last one is the best way to show that their policies are not good for Oregon. Where can people reach out to you, Representative?
Yeah, they can reach me. If you follow me on social media, that would be great. At Twitter, I'm Real Ed Diehl. My last name is spelled Diehl. You can also find me at Facebook, on Facebook at Ed Diehl for Oregon. That would be great. And I try and keep those pretty up to date. So any additional correspondence or communication I have, you can follow it there. You can also sign up for my newsletter at eddiehl.com. Again, that's EDDIEHL.com.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Diehl. It was a pleasure talking with you today. And for all our listeners on the Young Republicans of Oregon podcast series, thank you for listening. Please join us in our efforts to denounce and end this request for proposal and destroy the MDM process, as only freedom of speech can bring in a true, better Oregon. With that, thank you for listening.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye.